The gavel came down like a gunshot. Lot 22, one widow, $40. Sold. Eleanor Hartwell flinched at the sound. Wood against wood, sharp and final. In 3 minutes, that gavel would fall for her. She pulled her children closer. 7 bodies pressed against hers like they could burrow inside her skin and hide there. The January wind tore through Copper Creek's town square, biting through her worn wool coat, through her patched dress, straight down to bone. Montana Territory in winter showed no mercy to anyone, least of all a widow with 7 hungry mouths to feed. Mama. Her youngest daughter tugged her sleeve. I am cold. I know, baby. Eleanor knelt in the frozen mud, pulling both 4-year-old twins against her chest. We are going to be fine. You hear me? We are going to be just fine. She did not believe it. But mothers lie to their children. That is what love looks like sometimes. The auction platform stood 6 feet above the crowd, wooden planks rough and splintered. Eleanor had splinters in her palms from gripping the railing. She did not feel them anymore. She did not feel much of anything except the cold and the fear. 43 men had walked past her today. 43. She had counted every single one. Some had laughed, some had sneered. Most just looked away like she was something shameful, something they did not want to see. Too fat one had said loud enough for everyone to hear. 7 kids another had whistled low. Might as well buy a plague. Eleanor had not cried. She had stopped crying 3 years ago when Thomas died in that mine collapse and left her with nothing but debt and 7 children who still needed to eat. Tears were a luxury she could not afford. Tears did not feed children. Lot 23. The auctioneer's voice rang out across the square. Harold Finch was thin as a rail, spectacles perched on his nose, fingers stained with ink. He had not looked at Eleanor once. Eleanor Margaret Hartwell, widow, 34 years, 7 children ages 4 to 15. Opening bid $75, includes all passage fees and provisional custody of minor children. A murmur rolled through the crowd. Not pity, something uglier. Eleanor lifted her chin and looked out at the sea of faces. Her children stood around her like a small army. Josephine, her oldest at 14, held the twins on her hips, her young face already wearing the expression of a woman who had seen too much. Samuel, 12 years old, stood rigid with barely contained fury, his fists clenched at his sides. Margaret, 10, had somehow found a stick and was holding it like a weapon, her red hair wild beneath her bonnet. William, 8, and thin as a reed, pressed against his mother's side, trying to make himself invisible. Catherine, 6, held her brother's hand and looked up at Eleanor with absolute trust in her eyes. And the twins, Lily and Rose, 4 years old, doing everything together as they always did, crying together now in their big sister's arms. $75, Finch repeated, his voice growing strained. Surely someone needs a capable housekeeper. Silence. $60. Nothing. The territorial officer stood behind the platform shuffling papers. Horace Fletcher. Eleanor had met him yesterday, had seen the way his eyes crawled over her body, had heard what he said when he thought she could not hear. Fat cow will not fetch $10. We will be splitting those brats up by sundown. Now Fletcher caught her eye and smiled, a thin, cruel smile that made her skin crawl. $50. Finch dropped the price again. Final offer. A wife, a mother, 7 workers in one. Nobody is paying $50 for that. The voice came from the crowd. A big man in a beaver skin coat, arms crossed tobacco juice, staining his beard. She is fat as a sow, and twice as useless. Only thing them kids are good for is cheap labor. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Eleanor felt Josephine stiffen beside her, felt Samuel's rage radiating like heat from a stove, felt her younger children shrink against her, trying to disappear. And something inside her snapped. She straightened her spine. She lifted her chin, and she looked the man in the beaver coat dead in the eye. My children, she said, her voice carrying clear across the square, are worth more than every man in this crowd combined. Silence fell like a hammer. The man in the beaver coat blinked, his face twisted with anger. Why, you uppity, but he never finished the sentence, because a voice cut through the January wind like a blade through butter. $300 gold, for the woman and all 7 children. Every head in the square turned. A man stepped forward from the shadows beneath the general store awning, tall, broad through the shoulders. Dressed in buckskin and worn leather, a fur-lined coat hanging open despite the cold. Dark hair fell past his collar, streaked with gray at the temples. His face looked like it had been carved from granite by a sculptor who did not believe in soft edges. Hard jaw, sharp cheekbones, and a thin scar running from his left eye down to his cheek, white against weathered skin. But it was his eyes that stopped Eleanor's breath. gray. Pale gray like the winter sky before a storm, and they were fixed on her. The crowd parted for him like water around a stone. Nobody touched him, nobody spoke to him. They just moved aside, watching with eyes that held fear and something else. Recognition. "Did he say 300? Finch's voice cracked. "Sir, did you say—" "You heard me." The man stopped at the base of the platform. His voice carried no warmth, but no cruelty either. Just fact. 300 in gold for the woman and all 7 children. Count it if you want, but count fast. Storm is coming, and I do not intend to be here when it hits." He reached into his coat and pulled out a leather pouch. The coins inside clinked heavily. Gold. Real gold, more money than most men in Copper Creek would see in 5 years. Eleanor stared at him. This stranger who had just paid a fortune for a woman the whole town called worthless. "Who are you?" The words came out before she could stop them. The man looked up at her. Those gray eyes held hers without flinching. "Name is Mercer," he said. "Elijah Mercer. Folks around here call me Eli." Behind Eleanor, Samuel sucked in a breath. "Mercer, the mountain man." The stranger's mouth twitched. "Not quite a smile. That what they call me. They say you killed—" Samuel stopped when Eleanor squeezed his arm hard. Eli's expression did not change. "They say a lot of things." "Are they true?" Eleanor asked. "Some." He held her gaze. "I do not lie about what I am, ma'am. But I do not hurt women. I do not hurt children. And I keep my word." Eleanor felt her children pressing against her, felt their fear, their confusion, their desperate, fragile hope. 7 lives hanging in the balance, 7 hearts beating against hers. "Why?" she asked. "Why would you pay $300 for a woman nobody wants?" Something shifted in those gray eyes, something old and heavy like a wound that had never fully healed. "Because I know what it is like," he said quietly, "to be the one nobody wants." Eleanor's throat tightened. Before she could respond, Fletcher shouldered forward. "This is highly irregular. Mr. Mercer has a reputation that—" "Mr. Mercer has gold." Finch was already counting coins, his fingers trembling with greed. "More than gold. This is all here. More than enough. The sale stands." A new voice cut in. Everyone turned. Reverend James Thornton stood at the edge of the platform. 60 years old, white-haired face lined with the kind of weariness that came from watching too many tragedies unfold. "The law is clear," Thornton continued. "Highest bidder takes the contract, unless Mrs. Hartwell objects." All eyes turned to Eleanor. She looked at Eli, at his scarred face and his storm-gray eyes, and his hands that looked capable of violence but had not moved toward any weapon. She looked at her children. 7 faces, 7 lives. She looked at Fletcher and his papers, the words she could read even from here. Orphan Placement Act, Work Farm Assignment, Foundling Home Transfer, the words that meant her family would be torn apart. Her children scattered across the frontier like dead leaves in the wind. "I do not object," Eleanor said clearly. "I accept." Eli nodded once. "Then let us go." But as Eleanor moved toward the edge of the platform, a shadow fell across her path. Mrs. Mercer. The voice was smooth as silk and cold as ice. "Congratulations on your marriage." Eleanor turned. The man who had spoken was handsome in a way that made her skin crawl. Dark hair slicked back with pomade, a fine wool coat despite the weather, a gold watch chain glinting at his vest. He looked like a businessman from back east, refined, cultured, civilized. But his eyes told a different story. Black as 2 pools of tar, empty of anything resembling human warmth. "Malcolm Drake," the man said, tipping his hat. "I own the Silver Dollar Saloon, among other establishments." His gaze slid past Eleanor, past Eli, and landed on Josephine, lingered there. Eleanor felt her blood turn to ice. "Beautiful children," Drake said softly. "Especially the oldest. She must be, 13, 14. Eleanor stepped between Drake and her daughter, blocking his view. "And not your concern." Drake smiled. The smile of a snake watching a mouse. "Everything in Copper Creek is my concern, Mrs. Mercer. I am a businessman. I see opportunity everywhere I look." He tilted his head. "Those boys of yours. Strong. They could work my mines. Good wages. Honest labor? No. And those girls—" His eyes gleamed. "Pretty things. The oldest especially. Such pretty things." Eli moved so fast Eleanor barely saw it. One moment he was standing beside the wagon. The next he was between Drake and Eleanor, one hand resting on the pistol at his hip. "Walk away, Drake." His voice was flat. "Dangerous." Or what Drake spread his hands. "You will shoot me in front of all these good people. I will do what needs doing. Same as always." For a long moment nobody moved. The wind howled through the square. The crowd watched in silence. Then Drake stepped back. That smile never left his face. "Safe travels, Mrs. Mercer." His eyes found Josephine one more time. I am sure we will meet again." He turned and walked away. The crowd parted for him like they had parted for Eli, but differently. With Eli, it had been wariness. With Drake, it was fear. Eleanor let out a breath she did not know she had been holding. Eli helped her onto the wagon seat. His hand was rough and calloused, but gentle. "Get the children settled," he said. "Storm is coming. We need to move." "Who is he?" Eleanor asked as she climbed up. "Drake. Who is he really?" Eli did not answer right away. He lifted the younger children into the wagon bed one by one, settling them on piles of blankets like they were made of glass. Grace first, then Hope, then Catherine, who immediately started helping the twins get comfortable. Eli climbed onto the wagon seat beside Eleanor. He picked up the reins. "Malcolm Drake," he said finally, "is a rattlesnake in a fancy suit. He owns half this territory through fear and debt. Saloons, gambling halls, other businesses I will not name with children listening." Eleanor's stomach turned. He was looking at Josephine like she was... "I know." Eli's jaw tightened. "He has a collection. Young girls, 15, 16 years old. They work in his establishments. Hostesses, he calls them." His hands flexed on the reins. "Nobody says anything because he has enough money to buy the law and enough men to bury anyone who complains." Eleanor felt ice spreading through her veins. "Will he come after us?" Eli was quiet for a long moment. The wagon creaked as the horses began to move. "Copper Creek fell away behind them, probably," he said, "but he will have to go through me first." They rode in silence for a while. The land changed as they climbed higher. Flat scrubland gave way to rolling hills, then steeper grades. Pine trees appeared dark and silent. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of coming snow. "Mr. Mercer." Samuel's voice came from the wagon bed. "Can I ask you something?" Eli glanced back at the boy. "Ask. Why did you really buy us?" Samuel's voice was raw with something between anger and desperation. "Nobody does something like that for nothing. $300 is a fortune. You could have bought a younger wife, prettier, without 7 kids dragging her down. So what do you want from us?" Eleanor started to speak, but Eli held up a hand. "You want the truth?" he asked. Samuel nodded. Eli was quiet for a moment. The horses plodded on, breath steaming in the cold air. 8 years ago, he said, finally, I had a family, a wife named Sarah, a daughter named Emily. She was 3 years old when the fever took her. Took Sarah too. 3 days. That is all it took to destroy everything I loved." Samuel said nothing. "I came west to die," Eli continued. "Built a homestead thinking I would work myself into the grave. But the body is stubborn. It keeps going even when the heart wants to stop." He paused. "I spent 8 years alone, 8 years of silence, 8 years of wondering why I was still breathing when they were not." His gray eyes found Eleanor's. "Then I saw your mother on that platform, a woman holding her children together while the whole world tried to tear them apart, a woman who did not break even when they called her worthless." He paused, "And I thought maybe there was a reason I was still here, to be part of something again, to matter to someone." Samuel was quiet for a long moment. Then he said softly, "You lost your daughter." "Yes. What was she like?" The question seemed to hit Eli like a physical blow. He looked away, jaw working. "She had her mother's eyes," he said finally. "Brown, warm. She laughed at everything. Even when she was sick, she laughed." His voice cracked. "I have not heard a child laugh in 8 years." From the wagon bed, a small voice piped up, "I can laugh." Everyone turned. Catherine, 6 years old with golden curls and a smile that could light up the darkest room, was looking at Eli with absolute seriousness. "If you want," she said, "I can laugh for you." Eli stared at her. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. Catherine did not wait for permission. She giggled, loud and bright and completely ridiculous given the circumstances. Margaret snorted. "That is not a real laugh." "This is a real laugh." She started cackling like a chicken being chased. "That is terrible," Samuel said, and despite himself, he cracked a smile. William started giggling. The twins, sensing the shift in mood, joined in with their high-pitched squeals. And Eleanor felt her heart crack open. She laughed. It bubbled up from somewhere deep inside, somewhere she had forgotten existed. A real laugh, her first in 3 years. Eli sat frozen on the wagon seat watching them, this chaos of children and noise and life. Then slowly his mouth curved into something that was almost a smile. "You're all crazy," he said gruffly. Probably Margaret agreed. "Mama says it runs in the family." "I did not say that." "You thought it." "Margaret Ann Hartwell," Mercer Margaret corrected. "We are Mercers now, right?" "That is how it works." Eleanor hesitated. She looked at Eli. Something shifted in his face. Something like hope, fragile and new, breaking through 8 years of ice. "Legally, yes," he said. But you do not have to. I like it. Margaret nodded firmly. Margaret Mercer sounds like someone who would punch a bad guy. It sounds like trouble, Samuel muttered. Trouble is good, keeps things interesting. The wagon rolled on through the darkening afternoon. Behind them, Copper Creek disappeared into the gathering snow. Ahead, the mountains waited. And somewhere in the chaos of fear and cold and desperate hope, Eleanor Hartwell began to imagine a future she had never let herself dream of. A home, a family, a man who looked at her like she was worth fighting for. The sun sank lower, the snow began to fall, and Eleanor, holding her children close, felt something she had not felt in 3 years. Not safety, not yet, but the possibility of it, and for now, that was enough. The blizzard came faster than anyone expected. 1 hour after leaving Copper Creek, the sky turned from gray to black. The wind stopped whispering and started screaming. Snow did not fall. It attacked. Horizontal sheets of white ice driving into their faces like 1,000 tiny needles. Eli hunched forward on the wagon seat, squinting through the chaos. His hands on the reins were steady, but Eleanor could see the tension in his shoulders. There is a trapper's cabin, he shouted over the wind. 1 mile ahead, maybe less. We can shelter there. Eleanor nodded already, climbing into the wagon bed. Her children were huddled together under every blanket they had, but it was not enough. Nothing was enough against this kind of cold. Will. She found her 8-year-old son curled in a ball, his thin body shaking violently. His lips were turning blue. Will, baby, look at me. The boy's eyes were glassy. See, cold, Mama. So cold. Eleanor pulled him against her chest, wrapping her body around his. She could feel his heart racing, feel the tremors running through his small frame. He had always been the sickest of her children. The one who caught every cough, every fever, the one she worried about most. Josie had already organized the others. The twins sat in her lap, her arms wrapped tight around them. Samuel and Margaret flanked them like guards. Catherine pressed against her brother Daniel, trying to share what little warmth she had. Mama, Samuel's voice cut through the wind. Will is getting worse. I know. Eleanor held her son tighter, felt his shivering grow more violent. I know, baby. Hold on. We are almost there. She looked up at the wall of white surrounding them. She could not see 10 feet in any direction, could not see the horses pulling the wagon, could not see anything but snow and darkness. Please, she thought, please, I cannot lose another one. I cannot. The minutes stretched into eternity. Will's breathing grew shallow. His shaking slowed, which was worse. Eleanor knew enough about cold to know that when the shivering stopped, death was close. Then, through the swirling chaos, a shape appeared. A cabin, small, dark, half buried in drifts, but standing. There. Margaret's voice cut through the storm. I see it. Eli pulled the wagon as close as he could. The horses were struggling now, hooves slipping on ice. Everyone out. He jumped down, already moving toward the cabin door. Now! Eleanor did not argue. She carried Will in her arms, his body too light, too cold. She stumbled through the snow toward the cabin ice, stinging her face wind, trying to knock her down. The door was frozen shut. Eli kicked it once, twice, 3 times. On the 4th kick, it burst open. Dark inside, cold, but dry, out of the wind. Get the children in, Eli ordered. I will start a fire. Within minutes, everyone was inside. Within 10 minutes, Eli had a fire roaring in the stone fireplace. Within 20 minutes, the cabin had transformed from a frozen tomb into something almost warm. Will lay closest to the flames, still shivering, but his color was coming back. Eleanor knelt beside him, rubbing his arms, his legs, forcing circulation back into his frozen limbs. Stay with me, Will. Stay with me. His eyes found hers. Mama. Are we safe? Eleanor pulled him into her lap, held him against her heart. Yes, baby, we are safe. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, 7 children huddled around a fire in a stranger's cabin. And Eleanor Hartwell watched Elijah Mercer move through the small space, checking windows, piling wood, hanging wet blankets to dry. He did not speak, did not offer comfort or false hope. But when he passed her, he paused. He will be all right, Eli said quietly. The cold is bad, but not deep. Warmth and rest will fix him. Eleanor looked up at him, at the scarred, silent man who had bought her family and was now saving her son. How do you know? Because I have seen worse. His gray eyes held hers. And because that boy has his mother's strength. He will fight. He moved away before she could respond. The night stretched on. The storm howled. The children fell asleep one by one, exhausted by fear and cold. Samuel tried to stay awake, insisting on keeping watch, but his eyes grew heavy and his head drooped until he was snoring softly against the wall. Eleanor could not sleep. She sat beside the fire, watching the flames dance, listening to her children breathe. 7 lives, 7 miracles, 7 reasons she had survived the past 3 years. She did not hear Eli approach until he sat down beside her. "You should rest," he said. "I cannot. Too much thinking." He nodded slowly. "I know the feeling." They sat in silence for a while. The fire crackled. The wind screamed outside, but inside the cabin there was a strange kind of peace. "Can I ask you something?" Eleanor said finally. "Anything. Tell me about them, Sarah and Emily. What were they like?" Eli was quiet for so long that Eleanor thought he would not answer. She was about to apologize for prying when he spoke. "Sarah loved wildflowers. She planted them everywhere around our cabin. Daisies, violets, lupines. She said the colors made her happy." His voice was soft, distant, like he was speaking to himself more than to her. "She sang when she cooked. Her voice was not pretty, not really, but I loved hearing it. The whole house was full of music." And Eli's jaw tightened. She had her mother's eyes, brown, warm like chocolate on a winter day. She laughed at everything, a bug, a cloud, a rock shaped like a frog. He paused. "The last time I saw her laugh was when she had a fever of 104. She told me not to be sad. She said she would meet me in heaven." Eleanor felt tears sliding down her cheeks. She did not try to stop them. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Do not be sorry." Eli turned to look at her. "You have 7 children. You understand." "I understand." They sat in silence again. But it was a different kind of silence now. Warmer, fuller. Thomas, Eleanor said finally. "My husband. He was the best man I ever knew. Not handsome, not rich. But he looked at me like I was the whole world. Every time I got pregnant, he worried himself sick. 7 times. She laughed softly, sadly. "He died saving a co-worker in the mine collapse. They said he could have gotten out, but he went back to push the other man clear first. Then the roof came down. A brave man, a foolish man." Eleanor's voice trembled. "I loved him, but I was angry too. He left me alone with 7 children and a mountain of debt. He died saving someone else and forgot that we needed him too." Eli nodded slowly. "I understand. Do you—" I asked myself the same question 1,000 times. If I had done something different. If I had taken Sarah and Emily away from the valley sooner. If I had found a doctor faster. If I had— He shook his head. "The truth is, there are no answers. Only loss. And how we live with it. How do you live with it? I did not." Eli looked at her, his gray eyes full of shadows. "I only existed until today." Eleanor reached out, slowly, carefully. She placed her hand over his. Her palm was small and warm against his calloused skin. He flinched, a tiny movement, but she felt it. "I am sorry." She started to pull away. His hand turned over, caught hers, held it gently. "Do not be sorry." His voice was rough. It has been a long time since anyone touched me like that, like I was human." They sat there as the fire burned low, 2 broken people finding something whole in the space between them. "We are going to make it," Eleanor said finally. "Are we not?" Eli squeezed her hand. "Yes, we are." The storm died some time before dawn. Eleanor woke to gray light filtering through the cabin's single window. The world outside was silent, buried under fresh snow. Will was better. His color had returned. He was asking for food, which was the best sign of all. Eli produced hardtack and dried beef from his supplies, and, for the first time in days, the children ate without complaint. "Mr. Mercer," Catherine tugged at his sleeve, "is your house far? Half a day more, if the weather holds. Is it nice? It is safe. But is it nice?" Something shifted in Eli's face, almost soft. "It is home. That is better than nice." Catherine considered this with the seriousness only a 6-year-old could muster. Then she nodded. "Okay, I believe you." They set out as soon as the horses were rested. The world had transformed overnight into a landscape of blinding white. Snow clung to every branch, every rock, every surface. Beautiful and deadly. The wagon moved slowly, carefully. Eli guided the horses with expert hands, navigating around drifts and frozen streams. The children huddled under blankets, too tired to argue, too cold to complain. By mid-afternoon they began to climb. The land rose sharply. Flat scrubland gave way to pine forests, then rocky outcroppings. The air grew thinner, colder, cleaner. And then, as the sun began its descent toward the mountains, Eli pulled the wagon to a stop. "There," he said quietly, "that is home." Eleanor looked up, and her breath caught in her throat. The homestead sat on a ridge overlooking a small valley, a cabin built of hand-hewn logs, solid and square with smoke rising from a stone chimney. A barn to the left, fenced pasture beyond, mountains standing guard on 3 sides like ancient sentinels. It was not a shack. It was not a rough shelter barely fit for animals. It was beautiful. "You built this?" Samuel's voice cracked with disbelief. "By yourself." 8 years, Eli said. Every log, every nail. But the cabin alone must have taken 2 years for the main structure, another 6 months for the barn. Fences took 3 summers. Eli clicked the reins, and the horses moved forward. Work goes slow when you are alone. Eleanor felt something shift in her chest. This was not just a homestead. This was 8 years of grief poured into wood and stone. 8 years of a man trying to build something, anything, to fill the emptiness inside him. As they climbed the narrow trail to the ridge, Eleanor noticed details she had missed from below. A vegetable garden dormant now, but neatly fenced. A chicken coop, a smokehouse. A well with a sturdy wooden cover. Everything placed with purpose. Everything built to last. And on the hillside above the cabin, 2 wooden crosses stood against the sky. Sarah and Emily. Eleanor understood without being told. That was where they rested. That was where Eli went to remember. The cabin was warm inside. Simple, but clean. A stone fireplace dominated one wall. A rough-hewn table with 2 chairs. A bed in the corner neatly made. Shelves lined with supplies. Everything was ordered. Everything was lonely. "It is not much," Eli muttered. "Been living alone too long. Did not think about—" "It is perfect," Eleanor said. Eli blinked. "It is solid. It is warm. It is safe." She met his eyes. "After everything we have been through, that is all that matters." The children spread out through the cabin like water filling empty spaces. Margaret claimed a corner near the fireplace. Samuel inspected the walls, testing their strength. Catherine and the twins immediately began exploring every inch of the floor. Within an hour, the silence of 8 years was shattered. There was laughter. There was arguing. There were questions, so many questions about everything from where to sleep, to what was for dinner, to whether the chickens had names. Eli stood by the door watching it all unfold. His face was unreadable, but his eyes held something Eleanor had not seen before. Wonder. That night, after the children were settled, Eleanor found him on the porch. He was staring up at the hillside where the 2 crosses stood silver in the moonlight. "Do you talk to them?" she asked softly. "Every day. For 8 years." He did not turn around. "I tell them about the weather, about the crops, about the deer I see in the valley. Small things, because I had nothing else to tell them. Now you do." He turned then, looked at her. The moonlight caught the scar on his cheek, but also softened the hard lines of his face. "I want to visit them," Eleanor said. "Someday, when you are ready." Eli did not answer immediately. Then he nodded. "Thank you," he said, his voice rough. "Thank you, Eleanor." It was the first time he had called her by her name. She stepped closer, stood beside him. Together they looked up at the stars, at the crosses on the hill, at the mountains that surrounded them like protective walls. "Eli," Eleanor said. "Yes. Whatever happens next." She placed her hand over his heart, felt it beating steady and strong. "I do not regret this, any of it." Eli covered her hand with his own. "Neither do I." They stood there as the night deepened. 2 people who had lost everything, finding something new in the ruins of their grief. But peace never lasts forever. And somewhere in Copper Creek, Malcolm Drake was already planning his next move. 2 weeks passed like a dream Eleanor was afraid to wake from. The rhythm of life on Granite Ridge settled into something that felt almost normal, almost safe, almost like the life she had imagined when Thomas was still alive, and the future stretched out before them like an endless summer road. Every morning began the same way. Eli rose before dawn, checking the animals, splitting wood, doing the 1,000 small tasks that kept a homestead running. Eleanor woke shortly after, kindling the fire, preparing breakfast, counting heads as her children emerged from sleep one by one. 7, always 7, all still here. Samuel had become Eli's shadow. The 12-year-old followed the older man everywhere, watching, learning, asking questions in his quiet, intense way. Eli taught him how to mend fences, how to read animal tracks in the snow, how to care for horses, how to hold a rifle properly, though Eleanor had made them promise that actual shooting lessons would wait. The change in her son was remarkable. The angry, desperate boy who had tried to carry the weight of the world on his thin shoulders was slowly disappearing. In his place stood someone calmer, someone who still worked hard, still protected his siblings, but no longer looked like he was drowning. One morning, Eleanor watched from the kitchen window as Eli and Samuel worked together to repair a section of fence that had collapsed under the weight of snow. They moved in comfortable silence, handing tools back and forth without words, understanding each other in the way men sometimes did. Samuel said something Eleanor could not hear. Eli paused. Then he put his hand on the boy's shoulder and said something back. Samuel nodded and smiled. Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes. She turned away before anyone could see. Josephine had transformed the cabin's small back room into a schoolhouse of sorts. Every afternoon she gathered her siblings around the table and taught them letters and numbers using a stick of charcoal and the smooth back of a wooden plank. At 14, Josephine should have been thinking about dances and pretty dresses and the silly dreams of girlhood. Instead, she had become a second mother, a teacher, a quiet pillar of strength that held the younger children steady when the world felt too big and too frightening. But Eleanor saw the shadows that crossed her daughter's face sometimes, the way her eyes would drift toward the trail leading down from the ridge, the way she flinched at unexpected sounds. She had not forgotten Drake. Neither of them had. Mama Josephine said one evening, as they washed dishes together in water heated over the fire, "Do you think he will come?" Eleanor did not pretend to misunderstand. "I do not know," she said honestly, "but Eli will protect us." One man against someone like Drake. Josephine's voice was barely a whisper. "Mama, I saw how he looked at me, like I was something to eat." Eleanor set down the dish she was holding. She took her daughter's hands in her own. "Listen to me," she said fiercely. "That man will never touch you, never. Do you understand? I will burn down the entire territory before I let him anywhere near you." "But what if?" "There is no what if." Eleanor pulled back, gripping Josephine's shoulders. "You are my daughter, my firstborn. I carried you under my heart for 9 months, and I have loved you every single day since. No man will ever take you from me. I swear it on your father's grave." Josephine's eyes filled with tears. "I am scared, Mama." "I know, baby. I'm scared too. But we are going to get through this together. You promise, I promise." Another lie, another prayer dressed up as certainty. But this time, Eleanor meant it with every fiber of her being. Margaret had discovered an unexpected passion. The 10-year-old with the fiery red hair and the fiercer temper had fallen in love with the animals. She spent hours in the barn talking to the horses, caring for the chickens, and attempting to tame a half-wild barn cat that wanted nothing to do with humans. "His name is Thunder," she announced one evening at dinner, "and he is my best friend." "Thunder hates everyone," Samuel pointed out. "Thunder hates everyone except me." Margaret lifted her chin. "He is just misunderstood. He scratched Will yesterday. Will deserved it." "I did not," Will protested. "You tried to pick him up. Thunder does not like to be picked up." Margaret shook her head sadly. "You have to earn his trust." Eli's mouth twitched. "Sounds like good advice for more than just cats." Margaret beamed at him. Will was stronger than he had been in years. The mountain air agreed with him. The regular meals agreed with him more. His cough had disappeared. His cheeks had filled out. He no longer looked like a strong wind might blow him away. He had taken to following Eleanor around the cabin, helping with small tasks, asking endless questions about everything from cooking to sewing to why the sky was blue. "Mama," he said one afternoon, as she kneaded bread dough on the wooden counter, "do you think Mr. Mercer will be our new papa?" Eleanor's hands stilled. "I do not know, sweetheart. That is a big question. I think he should be." Will nodded seriously. "He is nice. And he makes you smile, does he?" "You did not used to smile, not since Papa went to heaven." Will reached up and touched her cheek. "But now you smile sometimes when you look at Mr. Mercer." Eleanor felt her heart squeeze. "You are too observant for your own good," she said, pulling him into a hug. "Is that bad?" "No, baby. That is wonderful." Catherine and the twins had turned the cabin into their personal kingdom. They played elaborate games of make-believe, turning blankets into castles and wooden spoons into swords. Their laughter filled every corner of the house, chasing away the shadows that had accumulated over 8 years of silence. Eli watched them with an expression Eleanor could not quite read. Part wonder, part pain, part something else entirely. One evening she found him sitting on the porch staring at nothing. "They remind you of her," Eleanor said softly. "Emily." Eli nodded slowly. "Catherine especially. Same age, same laugh." He paused. "Sometimes I hear her playing and I forget. For just a second I forget that Emily is gone. And then I remember, and it is like losing her all over again." Eleanor sat down beside him. "I am sorry. If this is too hard—" "No." Eli shook his head. "It is not too hard. It is—" He struggled for words. "It is like waking up after a long sleep. Everything hurts because I have not used these muscles in so long. But the hurting means I am alive. It means I can feel again." He turned to look at her. "I spent 8 years trying not to feel anything, trying to be numb. I thought if I could just stop caring, stop wanting, stop hoping, then nothing could hurt me again. Did it work? No. Eli's voice was raw. It just made me dead while I was still breathing. Eleanor reached out, took his hand. He did not flinch this time. I want to teach you to shoot, Eli said. The statement came out of nowhere, shattering the soft moment like a rock through glass. What you need to know how to defend yourself. He met her eyes. Drake is not going away. A man like that does not give up. He will come back, and when he does, I need to know that you can protect yourself and the children if something happens to me. If something happens to you? Eleanor pulled her hand back. What are you planning? Nothing. I am just being realistic. Eli stood pacing to the edge of the porch. I am one man. Drake has money, men power. If he decides to come for you, I might not be able to stop him alone. But if you can shoot, if Josephine can shoot, if Samuel can shoot, then we have a chance. Eleanor stared at him. You want to turn my children into soldiers. I want to keep them alive. They are children, Eli. Josie is 14, Samuel is 12. They should not have to think about killing anyone. They should not have to think about a lot of things. Eli turned to face her, and his eyes were hard. But the world does not care what they should think about. The world only cares about what is. And what is right now is that a dangerous man wants your daughter. He will not stop until he gets what he wants or until someone stops him. The words hung in the air between them. Eleanor wanted to argue, wanted to scream that this was wrong, that children should be children, that there had to be another way. But she had seen Drake's eyes. She had seen the way he looked at Josephine. And she knew Eli was right. Fine, she said. Teach me. The next morning, Eli took Eleanor behind the barn where he had set up a row of old tin cans on a fallen log. He placed a rifle in her hands, showed her how to hold it, how to brace it against her shoulder, how to sight along the barrel. The most important rule, he said, the gun is always loaded, even when you know it is not, even when you just emptied it yourself. You treat every gun like it can kill because it can. Eleanor nodded. Second rule, never point at anything you do not intend to destroy. Third rule, finger off the trigger until you are ready to fire. He moved behind her, adjusting her stance, her grip. Now, he said, see that can in the middle? Focus on it. Breathe in, breathe out. Squeeze the trigger slowly. Do not pull. Squeeze. Eleanor squeezed. The rifle kicked against her shoulder like an angry mule. The sound was deafening. The can did not move. Again, Eli said. She fired again, and again, and again. By the end of the first session, her shoulder ached, her ears rang, and she had hit exactly one can out of 20 shots. Not bad, Eli said, for a beginner. That was terrible. That was normal. He took the rifle from her, checked it, set it aside. Tomorrow we do it again, and the day after, and the day after that, until hitting the target is as natural as breathing. He was true to his word. Every morning before the sun was fully up, Eleanor practiced shooting. Josephine joined her on the third day. Samuel had been practicing in secret for a week already. By the end of the second week, Eleanor could hit a target at 50 yards more often than she missed. Josephine was almost as good. Samuel was better than both of them. You learn fast, Eli told him one evening. I have to. Samuel's young face was set with determination. Someone has to protect Mama and the girls if you are not here. I will always be here. You do not know that. Samuel met Eli's eyes. Nobody knows that. Papa thought he would always be there too. Eli was quiet for a long moment. You are right, he said finally. I do not know what will happen, but I can promise you this. As long as I am breathing, I will fight for this family, every single one of you. Samuel nodded slowly. Then I will fight too. They shook hands, man to man. Eleanor watched from the cabin window, tears streaming down her face. The supplies ran low faster than expected, with 9 mouths to feed instead of 1. Eli rode down to Copper Creek on a gray February morning. Eleanor did not want him to go. The thought of him being in the same town as Drake made her stomach churn. I will be careful, he promised, in and out before anyone notices. But when he returned that evening, his face was grim. What happened? Eleanor asked immediately. Nobody would sell to me. Eli pulled off his gloves, his jaw tight. The general store, the feed supply, the butcher. They all suddenly had nothing in stock, or they were closed, or they had some excuse. Drake. Eli nodded. He has put out the word. Anyone who does business with me will answer to him. What do we do? Eli was quiet for a moment. There was one person who helped, a woman named Martha Whitfield. She owns a small dress shop at the edge of town. She gave me what supplies she could spare and told me something important. What? There is a federal marshal based in Fort Collins, name of Henry Caldwell. He has been looking for a way to bring down Drake for years, but nobody will testify against him. Too scared, and then Martha says, if we can get evidence, if we can convince people to come forward, Caldwell will act. Eleanor felt a flicker of hope. Evidence of what? Everything. Eli's voice hardened. The loan sharking, the intimidation, the girls who disappeared, the men who had accidents after crossing him. Drake has been careful, but he has left trails. If we can find them, if we can get people to talk? He did not finish the sentence. He did not need to. If they could bring down Drake legally, they would not have to fight him with guns. If... Eleanor lay awake that night staring at the ceiling, listening to her children breathe. 7 lives, 7 souls depending on her. And somewhere out there a wolf was circling, waiting, planning. She would not let him take them. Whatever it cost, whatever she had to do, she would protect her family, even if it meant becoming someone she did not recognize, even if it meant learning to kill. The winter wind howled outside, but inside the cabin, Eleanor Hartwell made herself a promise. Drake would not win. Not this time. Not ever. The visitor arrived on a cold morning in late February. Eleanor was kneading bread dough when she heard the sound of hoofbeats on the frozen trail. Her hands stilled. Her heart began to race. Beside her, Josephine looked up from the potatoes she was peeling, her face going pale. Eli was already moving. He grabbed his rifle from its place by the door and stepped onto the porch. "Stay inside," he said over his shoulder. "All of you." Eleanor wiped her hands on her apron and moved to the window. She could see a single rider approaching, hands raised to show he carried no weapon. An older man, white hair beneath a black hat, a long dark coat, not Drake's men. They would not come alone. They would not come with hands raised. Eli kept his rifle ready as the rider approached. "That is far enough," he called out. "State your business." The rider stopped his horse 20 feet from the porch. "Mr. Mercer." The voice was calm, measured. "I am Reverend James Thornton from Copper Creek. I come in peace with news you need to hear." Eli did not lower the rifle. "How do I know Drake did not send you? Because Malcolm Drake would rather see me dead than delivering messages to his enemies." Thornton's voice carried a hint of dry humor. "I have been a thorn in his side for 15 years. He would not trust me to fetch his morning coffee." Eli studied the man for a long moment, then slowly he lowered the rifle. "Come in, Chid, but keep your hands where I can see them." Reverend Thornton dismounted with the stiffness of a man who had spent too many hours in the saddle. He was older than Eleanor had first thought. 60 at least, maybe more. His face was lined with the kind of weariness that came from watching too many tragedies unfold, and being powerless to stop them. He stepped into the cabin and removed his hat. "Mrs. Mercer," he nodded to Eleanor, "I apologize for the intrusion. Would you like some coffee, Reverend?" "It is not much, but it is hot. That would be most welcome. Thank you." Eleanor poured while Eli positioned himself between Thornton and the children who had gathered in the doorway to the back room, watching with wide eyes. The Reverend took the cup gratefully. He wrapped his hands around it, letting the warmth seep into his frozen fingers. "I will get straight to the point," he said. "The people of Copper Creek are afraid. They have been afraid for a long time. Drake has held this territory in a grip of terror for nearly a decade. He has destroyed businesses, ruined families, and done things I cannot speak of in front of children." "We know," Eli said flatly. "Get to the part that matters." Thornton looked up, meeting Eli's eyes. "The part that matters is this. They are tired of being afraid. What you did at the auction, standing up to Drake, paying $300 for a woman he had already marked as his target, word has spread. People are talking, whispering, hoping for what? That someone will finally stand against him." Eleanor felt her breath catch. "There are others," Thornton continued. "Merchants who have been bled dry by his loans. Farmers who have lost their land to his schemes. Families who have lost daughters to his establishments. They want to fight. They just need someone to lead them. You want me to lead a rebellion against Drake?" Eli shook his head. "I am one man with a family to protect. I cannot wage a war. Not a war." Thornton leaned forward. "Justice, there is a federal marshal in Fort Collins, Henry Caldwell. He has wanted Drake for years, but has never had enough evidence or witnesses willing to testify. If we could gather both, if we could give Caldwell what he needs, he would act, he would have to. Drake's crimes cross territorial lines, federal jurisdiction. Even Drake's bought judges could not protect him then." Eli was quiet for a long moment. "Why come to me?" he asked finally. "Why not organize this yourself?" "Because I am a preacher." Thornton smiled sadly. "I can inspire, but I cannot lead. Not in the way this requires. The people need someone they believe can actually defeat Drake. Someone who has already stood against him and lived. Someone who has already made himself a target, you mean? Yes. Thornton did not flinch from the truth. I will not pretend there is no risk. Drake will come for you eventually, whether you help us or not. At least this way, you have allies. At least this way, there is a chance for something more than just survival. Eleanor stepped forward. What would we need to do? Gather evidence. Thornton turned to her. Document Drake's crimes, convince witnesses to come forward, then get everything to Marshal Caldwell before Drake can stop us. How long would that take? Weeks? Maybe a month. And in the meantime, Eli's voice was hard. Drake will not sit idle while we build a case against him. No, Thornton agreed. He will not. That is why we must move carefully. Secretly. He pulled a folded paper from his coat and handed it to Eli. This is a list of people who have agreed to testify if they believe they will be protected. There are more who might join if approached correctly. Martha Whitfield has been coordinating from her shop. Eli unfolded the paper, scanning the names. 12 people, he said. That is all 12 who have committed, but each of them knows others who have suffered. The network is larger than it appears. We just need to activate it. Eleanor looked at Eli. He looked at her. In his eyes, she saw the same calculation running through his mind that was running through hers. The same weighing of risks and rewards. The same desperate hope that there might be a way out of this that did not end in blood. We need to discuss this, Eli said finally. Alone. Of course. Thornton stood setting down his empty cup. I will wait outside, but please do not take too long. Every day we delay is another day Drake has to prepare. He stepped onto the porch, closing the door behind him. The cabin fell silent. Then everyone started talking at once. Mama, you cannot seriously be considering this. Josephine's voice was high with fear. If Drake finds out, he will kill us all. If we do nothing, he will come for us anyway. Samuel's jaw was set. At least this way we have a chance. What about the little ones? Margaret demanded. What about Lily and Rose and Catherine? They cannot fight. Nobody is asking them to fight. Eleanor held up her hands. Everyone, please, quiet. Silence fell. Eleanor turned to Eli. What do you think? Eli was still staring at the list of names. I think Thornton is right about one thing, he said slowly. Drake will come for us eventually. We embarrassed him at the auction. Men like him do not forget that. The only question is whether we wait for him to attack on his terms or whether we try to bring the fight to him on ours. So we do this. Eli looked up, met her eyes. I will not make this decision alone. This affects all of us, every single person in this family. He looked around at the children. I want to hear from everyone. Me too. Catherine asked, her eyes wide. You too. One by one they spoke. Samuel was first. We fight. His voice was firm. I am tired of running, tired of being afraid. If there is a chance to end this for good, we have to take it. Josephine hesitated. I am scared, she admitted. But I am more scared of doing nothing and watching Drake win. She swallowed. I say we do it. Margaret nodded vigorously. Thunder and I are ready to fight. Thunder is a cat, Samuel pointed out. Thunder is a warrior, Will spoke quietly. I do not want to fight, but I do not want the bad man to hurt Mama or Josie either. So, I guess we have to. Catherine bit her lip, thinking hard. If we help the other people, she said slowly, then maybe they will help us too. That is what Mama always says. Help others, and they will help you. Lily and Rose looked at each other, then back at Eleanor. We do not understand, Lily admitted. But if Mama says it is okay, then it is okay. Rose nodded. Mama knows best. Eleanor felt tears threatening. She blinked them back. That just leaves you, she said to Eli. Eli folded the paper carefully and tucked it into his pocket. I spent 8 years hiding from the world, he said, hiding from pain, hiding from loss, hiding from everything that made life worth living. He looked around the cabin at the faces watching him. I am done hiding. This family is worth fighting for, every single one of you. So yes, we do this together. Eleanor nodded. Then it is decided. She opened the door. Reverend Thornton, please come back inside. We have things to discuss. The planning took hours. Thornton laid out everything he knew about Drake's operations, the saloons, the gambling halls, the loan sharking business, the mysterious disappearances, the accidents that seemed to happen to anyone who stood in Drake's way. He had names, dates, locations. Not enough to convict on their own, but enough to start building a case. The biggest challenge is getting evidence out of Copper Creek, Thornton explained. Drake has eyes everywhere. If he sees anyone carrying documents or meeting with outsiders, he will know something is wrong. Then we do not take documents out of Copper Creek. Eleanor leaned forward. We bring Marshal Caldwell to Copper Creek. Thornton frowned. How someone rides to Fort Collins with a message, tells Caldwell what we have, asks him to come in person with enough men to make arrests. That is a 2-day ride, Eli said. And Drake watches all the main roads. Then we do not use the main roads. Eleanor looked at Samuel. We use someone Drake will not expect. Someone small and fast who can travel through the backcountry without being noticed. Samuel straightened. Me? No. Eleanor's voice was firm. Absolutely not. Mama, I can do this. Samuel stood, his young face blazing with determination. I know these mountains. Eli has been teaching me. I can travel light and fast. I can stay hidden. Nobody would suspect a 12-year-old boy. You are my son. I will not send you into danger. You did not send me. Samuel met her eyes. I am volunteering. This is my family too, Mama. My sisters, my brothers. If I can help protect them, I have to try. Eleanor looked at Eli desperately. He sighed. The boy is right, he said reluctantly. He is our best option. Anyone else would be too conspicuous, but he fixed Samuel with a hard stare. If we do this, we do it my way. You follow my route exactly. You stop where I tell you to stop. You hide if you see anyone. Anyone. And if something goes wrong, you run. You do not try to fight. You do not try to be a hero. You run, and you survive. Understood. Samuel nodded solemnly. Understood. Eleanor felt like her heart was being torn in two. I cannot lose you, she whispered. Samuel, if anything happened to you, nothing will happen. Samuel took her hands. Mama, you taught me to be strong. You taught me to protect our family. Let me do this. She wanted to refuse. Every instinct screamed at her to keep her son safe, to lock him in the cabin and never let him out of her sight. But she looked into his eyes and saw something that took her breath away. He was not a child anymore. Somewhere in the past 3 years, somewhere between his father's death and this frozen ridge in Montana Territory, her little boy had become a young man. If you are not back in 4 days, she said finally, I am coming after you myself. Samuel smiled. I will be back in 3. They spent the rest of the day preparing. Eli drew maps from memory, marking safe routes through the mountains, pointing out landmarks, identifying places to hide and places to avoid. He gave Samuel his best horse, a sturdy bay mare named Runner, who could go for miles without tiring. He wrote a letter to Marshal Caldwell explaining everything they had learned, listing the witnesses who were willing to testify, describing Drake's crimes in unflinching detail. Thornton added his own letter, using his authority as a man of God to vouch for the truth of the claims. Eleanor packed food for the journey, dried meat, hardtack, a skin of water. She packed extra socks because she knew his feet would get cold. She packed a small knife because she knew he might need it. She packed a photograph of the family because she knew he might get scared. She did not pack her fear. That stayed locked inside her chest, coiled like a snake waiting to strike. Samuel left before dawn. The whole family gathered on the porch to see him off. Catherine and the twins did not fully understand what was happening, but they sensed its importance. They clung to Eleanor's skirts, watching with wide eyes as Samuel mounted Runner. Be careful, Josephine said, hugging him tight. If you die, I will kill you. That does not make sense. I do not care. Just come back. Margaret punched his arm. You better not forget about us while you are being a hero. I could never forget you. You are too annoying. Will just hugged him, too overwhelmed for words. Eleanor was last. She cupped her son's face in her hands, memorizing every feature, the shape of his eyes, the angle of his jaw, the stubborn set of his chin that was so much like his father's. You come back to me, she said. You hear me, Samuel Thomas Mercer. You come back to me, or I swear I will march into heaven itself and drag you home. I will come back, Mama. Samuel's voice cracked. I promise. He kicked his heels against Runner's flanks, and the horse surged forward. Eleanor watched until he disappeared into the pre-dawn darkness, until the sound of hoofbeats faded, until there was nothing left but silence and the wind and the terrible weight of waiting. Eli's hand found hers. He will make it, he said quietly. You do not know that. No, but I believe it. That boy has more courage than men twice his age. He gets it from his mother. Eleanor leaned into him, letting his strength hold her up. Now we wait, she said. Now we wait. The hours crawled by like wounded animals. Eleanor tried to keep busy. There was bread to bake, clothes to mend, children to teach and feed and comfort. But no matter what she did, her mind kept drifting to Samuel. Where was he now? Was he safe? Had Drake's men spotted him? Was he cold? Was he scared? Was he alive? The first day passed, then the second, then the third. On the morning of the 4th day, Eleanor stood on the porch staring down the trail, her heart pounding with equal parts hope and dread. He said 3 days, she whispered. He promised 3 days. The mountains can slow even the fastest rider. Eli stood beside her, but she could see the worry in his eyes. Give him time. How much time? How much time before I go after him? Before Eli could answer, Margaret came running from the barn. "Riders," she shouted, "coming up the trail, a lot of them." Eleanor's blood turned to ice. She ran to the edge of the ridge, Eli right behind her. Below, dust rose from the valley floor. Horses! At least 15, maybe 20. Moving fast, moving toward them. Drake Eli said grimly, "He must have found out about our plan. Samuel. We do not know that anything happened to him." Eli grabbed her shoulders. "We do not know anything yet. Right now we need to focus on defending this position. Against 20 men, we have high ground. We have cover. We have something worth fighting for." He met her eyes. "And we have each other. That has to be enough." Eleanor wanted to scream, wanted to cry, wanted to run down that mountain and tear apart anyone who had hurt her son. But she had 6 other children depending on her, 6 lives that needed protecting. She nodded. "Tell me what to do." Eli squeezed her shoulders. "Get the children to the cellar, the one with the tunnel I showed you. If things go bad, you take them and run. Do not look back. Do not wait for me. Do you understand now?" Eleanor shook her head fiercely. "I will not leave you." "Eleanor, I said no." She grabbed his shirt, pulling him close. "We are a family now. Families do not abandon each other. We fight together or we die together. There is no other option." Eli stared at her. Something shifted in his eyes. Something that might have been fear or love or both. "Then God help us all," he said. He handed her a rifle. "Time to see how well you learned." The riders came at dusk. 23 men on horseback spreading out across the base of the ridge like wolves circling wounded prey. Torches flickered in the gathering darkness, casting long shadows that danced across the snow. At the front of the formation, mounted on a black stallion that seemed to drink in the fading light, Malcolm Drake sat watching the cabin above with the patience of a man who had all the time in the world. Eleanor crouched behind the woodpile beside Eli, her rifle steady in her hands. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but her breathing was even, calm, the way Eli had taught her. Behind them, the cabin was dark and silent. Josephine was inside with the younger children, all of them huddled in the root cellar beneath the floorboards. The entrance to the escape tunnel was there, hidden behind a false wall that Eli had built years ago. If everything went wrong, Josephine knew what to do. She would take her siblings through the tunnel, emerge half a mile away in a hidden ravine, and run. Eleanor prayed it would not come to that. "Mercer." Drake's voice carried up the ridge, smooth and cold as polished ice. "I know you can hear me. Let us talk like civilized men." Eli did not answer. His rifle was trained on Drake's chest, finger resting beside the trigger, waiting. "I have to say," Drake continued, "I admire your courage. Stupid, certainly. Suicidal, probably, but admirable nonetheless." He spread his hands in a gesture of mock reasonableness. "This does not have to end in blood. All I want is the woman and the oldest girl. Give them to me, and I will let you and the other children go free. You have my word. Your word." Eli's voice was flat, carrying clearly through the winter air. The word of a man who ruins families for profit. The word of a man who makes young girls disappear. That word, Drake's smile did not waver. "I am a businessman, Mercer. Nothing more. I see opportunity where others see only obstacles. The woman is strong. The girl is beautiful. They have value. Surely even a mountain hermit can understand the concept of value." Eleanor felt rage boiling in her chest. She wanted to shoot him, wanted to watch that smug smile disappear in a spray of crimson. But she held her position, held her breath, waited. "Here is my counteroffer." Eli raised his voice so every man on the ridge could hear. "Turn around. Ride away. Never come back. Do that, and I will let you live." Silence fell over the ridge. Then Drake laughed. A cold, sharp sound that echoed off the mountains like breaking glass. "You have spirit, Mercer. I will give you that." He turned to the man beside him, a hulking figure with a scarred face and dead eyes. "Marcus, burn them out." Marcus raised his hand. The men with torches began to move forward. Eli fired. The crack of the rifle split the night. Marcus jerked backward, a red bloom spreading across his shoulder. He tumbled from his horse, screaming. The ridge erupted into chaos. Men shouted, horses reared, torches wavered and fell. Eli worked the action of his rifle with mechanical precision, firing again and again into the massive bodies below. 2 more men fell. A third clutched his leg and collapsed. Eleanor found a target, a bearded man trying to scramble up the slope, and squeezed the trigger. The rifle kicked against her shoulder. The man dropped. She did not think about what she had done, could not afford to think. There would be time for horror later, time for guilt and nightmares and tears. Right now, there was only survival. "Pull back," someone screamed from below. "Pull back and regroup." The attackers retreated, dragging their wounded with them. For a moment, silence returned to the ridge. 4 down. Eli was reloading his movements fast and sure. Maybe 5. That still leaves almost 20. They will try again, Eleanor said. Yes, they will. As if to confirm his words, Drake's voice rang out once more. Impressive, Mercer! You have cost me some good men. He did not sound angry. If anything, he sounded amused. But you cannot keep this up forever. Sooner or later, you will run out of bullets, run out of strength, run out of time. A torch arced through the darkness, spinning end over end. It landed on the cabin roof with a shower of sparks. Then another, and another, and another. No. Eleanor started to rise, but Eli pulled her down. Wait, the roof is on fire. I know. The children are in there. They are in the cellar. The fire will not reach them. Not quickly. Eli's jaw was tight, but his eyes were focused. If we try to fight the fire, we expose ourselves. That is what Drake wants. So we just let our home burn, we let the building burn. Eli met her eyes. Home is not wood and stone. Home is the people inside. As long as they are safe, nothing else matters. Eleanor watched the flames lick across the roof, hungry and relentless. 8 years of Eli's work. 8 years of grief and loneliness poured into every nail and beam, going up in smoke. He did not flinch, did not waver. His eyes stayed fixed on the enemy below. They are moving again, he said, coming up from 3 directions this time. He pressed a rifle into her hands. Take the east side. Shoot anything that moves. What about the west? I will handle it. Eli, there are too many of them, I know. He leaned forward and kissed her, hard and desperate and full of everything he could not say. Whatever happens, remember that I love you. All of you. Before she could respond, he was gone, moving through the shadows like a ghost. Eleanor took her position and raised her rifle. The flames spread quickly. Within minutes, the entire roof was ablaze, sending columns of orange sparks spiraling into the black sky. The heat was intense, even from 50 feet away. Eleanor could feel it on her face, her hands, the back of her neck. She tried not to think about her children huddled in the cellar beneath that inferno, tried not to imagine their fear, their confusion, their desperate hope that Mama would come for them. She would. As soon as she could. As soon as this was over. A shadow moved at the edge of her vision. She fired without thinking. The shadow collapsed with a grunt of pain. Another appeared. She fired again. Missed. Fired a 3rd time. Hit. The rifle clicked empty. Her hands trembled as she reloaded. Fingers that had kneaded bread and mended clothes and wiped away tears now fumbled with brass cartridges, trying to slot them into place. A man burst from the darkness, knife gleaming in the firelight. Eleanor did not have time to aim. She swung the rifle like a club, catching him across the face. He staggered. She hit him again. He went down. She stood over him, breathing hard, the rifle raised for another blow. But he did not move. On the other side of the clearing, she could hear gunfire. Eli was still fighting, still alive. She ran toward the sound. The scene she found was chaos. Eli stood with his back against the barn wall, a pistol in each hand. 3 men lay motionless at his feet. 2 more were circling, trying to flank him. Eleanor raised her rifle and fired. One of the circling men dropped. The other spun toward her, eyes wide with shock. Eli shot him before he could react. For a moment, everything was still. The crackle of flames, the distant shouts of retreating men, the ragged sound of their own breathing. How many? Eleanor gasped. 11 down, maybe 12. Eli was bleeding from a cut on his forehead, but his eyes were clear. The rest have pulled back. Drake. Still out there, waiting. As if summoned by his name, Drake's voice cut through the night. Very impressive, Mercer. You have exceeded my expectations. A pause. But tell me, where are the children? Surely they are not still in that burning cabin? Eleanor's blood ran cold. Perhaps Drake continued. We should go check on them. Make sure they are safe. No. Eleanor started forward, but Eli grabbed her arm. He is baiting you. I do not care. My children are in there. The cellar is stone. The tunnel is clear. They have time. How much time? The roof could collapse any minute. The smoke alone could... She did not finish the sentence. She did not have to. Eli's face twisted with anguish, the face of a man being torn in two. Go, he said finally. Get the children out through the tunnel. I will hold them here. You cannot hold them alone. I do not have to hold them forever. Just long enough. He pushed her toward the cabin. Go, Eleanor. Save our family. Eleanor wanted to argue, wanted to stay and fight beside him, but she looked at the burning cabin, thought of her children trapped beneath it, and knew what she had to do. She ran. The cabin was an inferno. Flames roared from every window, every crack, every gap in the logs. The heat was unbearable. Eleanor shielded her face with her arm and pushed through the door. Inside was hell. Smoke filled the air, thick and choking. The ceiling groaned and cracked, raining down sparks and burning debris. The floor was hot beneath her feet, the boards already beginning to char. "Josie!" she screamed. "Josie, can you hear me?" A muffled voice from below. "Mama! Mama! We are here!" Eleanor dropped to her knees, crawling toward the trapdoor in the corner. Her eyes streamed. Her lungs burned. She could barely see 3 feet in front of her. Her hand found the iron ring of the trapdoor. She pulled. It would not budge. Something had fallen on top of it. A beam heavy and burning. No, 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 no. Eleanor grabbed the beam and pushed. The heat seared her palms. She screamed but kept pushing. It shifted an inch, 2 inches. Not enough. "Mama!" Josephine's voice was rising in panic. "Mama, we cannot breathe down here. Hold on, baby. Mama is coming." She braced her feet and pushed with everything she had. Every ounce of strength, every drop of desperation, every prayer she had ever prayed. The beam shifted, rolled, crashed to the side. Eleanor yanked open the trapdoor. Josephine's face looked up at her, pale and terrified, surrounded by the faces of her siblings. Catherine was crying. The twins were clinging to each other. Will was coughing violently. Margaret was holding a hissing cat and looked ready to fight anyone who tried to take it. The tunnel. Eleanor gasped. "Go, now." "We tried." Josephine's voice broke. "It is blocked." Something collapsed. Eleanor felt the floor beneath her groan. "Then we go out the front." She reached down, grabbing hands, pulling children up one by one. "Stay low. Cover your mouths. Do not stop for anything." She herded them toward the door through the smoke and flames and falling debris. Catherine stumbled. Eleanor caught her. Will collapsed, coughing. She threw him over her shoulder. The twins wailed. Josephine grabbed them both and ran. They burst through the door into the cold night air. Eleanor counted heads as they ran. Josephine. Samuel was still gone. Margaret with that ridiculous cat. Will on her shoulder. Catherine running beside her. The twins in Josephine's arms. 6. All 6 accounted for. Behind them the cabin collapsed with a roar like a dying beast. Eleanor did not look back. They made it to the tree line before she finally stopped. The children collapsed around her, gasping, coughing, sobbing. Eleanor set Will down gently and checked him for burns. Then Catherine. Then the twins. Then Margaret. Then Josephine. All safe. All alive. All terrified but whole. Eli. Eleanor stood looking back toward the burning ruins of their home. Eli was still out there, still fighting. Mama Josephine grabbed her arm. "You cannot go back. I have to. You will die. If I do not go, he will die." Eleanor pulled free. "Stay here. Keep the children hidden. If I'm not back by dawn." She swallowed. "If I'm not back by dawn, take them and run. Do not stop until you reach Fort Collins. Find Marshal Caldwell. Tell him everything." "Mama, promise me, Josephine." Her daughter's eyes filled with tears. "I promise." Eleanor kissed her forehead. Then she turned and ran back toward the flames. She found Eli behind the barn. He was on his knees, his rifle lying empty beside him. Blood soaked his shirt from a wound in his side. 3 more bodies lay around him, but he was alive. "Eli." Eleanor dropped beside him, pressing her hands against the wound. "Eli, stay with me." Eleanor. His eyes were unfocused, glazed with pain. "The children safe. They are all safe." "Good." He smiled weakly. "That is good." A shadow fell over them. Eleanor looked up. Malcolm Drake stood 10 feet away, a pistol in his hand, that terrible smile on his face. "How touching," he said. "True love amidst the carnage. I almost hate to interrupt." Eleanor moved to put herself between Drake and Eli. "You will not touch him." Brave words from an unarmed woman. Drake raised the pistol. "But I think we both know how this ends." "You are right, we do." Eleanor pulled Eli's pistol from his holster and fired. The shot went wide, missing Drake by inches. He flinched his own shot, going wild. Eleanor fired again. And again. One of the bullets caught Drake in the thigh. He screamed and fell, the pistol flying from his grip. Eleanor stood over him, the gun trained on his face. "Please." For the first time, Drake's composure cracked. "Please, I will give you anything. Money, land, power, whatever you want. I want my family safe." Eleanor's voice was cold. "I want my children to grow up without fear. I want my husband to live. Can you give me that?" "Yes." Drake nodded frantically. "Yes, I swear. I will leave. I will never come back. Just let me live." Eleanor looked at him, at this man who had terrorized a territory, who had destroyed families for profit, who had looked at her daughter like she was meat to be consumed. Her finger tightened on the trigger, but she did not fire. "You are not worth the bullet," she said, "or the nightmare of killing you." She stepped back. "You will face justice, Drake, real justice, and it will be worse than anything I could do to you." Drake stared at her with something that might have been shock or relief or hatred maybe all three. Before he could speak, a new sound cut through the night. Hoofbeats, dozens of them, coming fast. Eleanor raised the pistol, ready for another fight, but the riders who emerged from the darkness were not Drake's men. They wore the uniform of federal marshals, and at their head, mounted on a gray horse, was a young man Eleanor would have recognized anywhere, Samuel. "Mama!" he shouted, jumping from his horse and running toward her. "Mama, I made it. I brought help." Behind him, a stern-faced man with a silver star on his chest dismounted and surveyed the scene. His eyes moved from the burning cabin to the bodies on the ground to Malcolm Drake, bleeding in the snow. "I am Marshal Henry Caldwell," he said. "I believe you have a story to tell me." Eleanor sank to her knees, suddenly too exhausted to stand. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I do." Samuel knelt beside her, his arms wrapped around her shoulders. "I told you I would come back," he said. Eleanor pulled him close and wept. The sun rose over Granite Ridge like a promise. Golden light spilled across the snow-covered peaks, turning the white landscape into a sea of diamonds. The sky was clear for the first time in days, a perfect crystalline blue that seemed to stretch forever in every direction. Eleanor stood on the ridge where her home had been, watching the dawn paint the world in shades of rose and gold. Behind her, the cabin was gone. Nothing remained but blackened timbers and ash still smoking faintly in the cold morning air. 8 years of Eli's work, 8 years of grief and loneliness made solid in wood and stone, gone in a single night. But as she looked at the ruins, Eleanor felt something unexpected. Not despair, not grief, something lighter, something almost like hope, because scattered across the ridge, wrapped in borrowed blankets and huddled around hastily built campfires, was her family. All of them, alive. Josephine sat with the twins in her lap, both girls finally asleep after a night of tears and terror. Margaret had found a sunny spot against a boulder and was methodically grooming Thunder, who had somehow survived the chaos and seemed thoroughly unimpressed by the whole affair. Will and Catherine were helping the marshal's men sort through salvaged supplies, their young faces serious with purpose. Samuel sat beside Eli, who was propped against a tree, while a military doctor stitched the wound in his side. 7 children, 1 husband, all breathing, all safe. That was worth more than any cabin. "Mrs. Mercer." Eleanor turned. Marshal Henry Caldwell approached, his boots crunching through the frozen snow. He was a tall man, lean and weathered, with gray hair cropped short beneath his hat, and eyes that had seen too much of the world's darkness to be surprised by anything anymore. "Marshal." How as the prisoner Caldwell's mouth twitched in what might have been satisfaction. "Drake is secured and awaiting transport to Fort Collins. He has been remarkably cooperative since your conversation last night. Something about not wanting to test your aim a second time." Eleanor felt her cheeks warm. I was not actually going to shoot him. He did not know that. Caldwell studied her with something like respect. "You did well, Mrs. Mercer. Most people would have broken under that kind of pressure. You held your family together through an assault that would have defeated trained soldiers. I had help. You had courage. That is rarer than help." He glanced toward Eli. "Your husband is a fortunate man. I am the fortunate one." Caldwell nodded slowly. "I wanted to let you know what happens next. Drake will stand trial in Fort Collins, federal court. The evidence your people gathered, combined with the testimony of witnesses from Copper Creek, should be more than enough for a conviction. What kind of sentence, life if justice is served? His crimes cross territorial lines: kidnapping, extortion, conspiracy to commit murder." He paused. "There are also allegations of human trafficking involving young women. We are still investigating, but initial findings suggest a network stretching across 3 territories." Eleanor thought of Josephine, of how close she had come to becoming one of Drake's victims. Her stomach turned. "Those women," she said quietly, "the ones who disappeared. Is there any way to find them?" "We are trying. Some may have been sold to establishments in other territories. Others may have assumed new identities to escape." Caldwell's face was grim. "We may never know the full extent of what he did, but we will try. Thank you. Do not thank me yet. There is still the matter of property damage, legal proceedings, witness protection." He pulled a folded document from his coat. "However, I have been authorized to offer you this." Eleanor took the paper and unfolded it. Her eyes widened. "This is a land grant, 160 acres including this ridge and the surrounding valley." Caldwell smiled slightly. "The federal government occasionally rewards citizens who assist in bringing dangerous criminals to justice. Consider it compensation for your losses and recognition of your service. I do not know what to say." Say you will rebuild. Say you will make this land into something that honors the sacrifices made here." Caldwell tipped his hat. "That will be thanks enough." He walked away, leaving Eleanor standing alone with the document in her hands. 160 acres, more land than she had ever dreamed of owning, more than Thomas could have earned in a lifetime of working the mines. She looked at the ruins of the cabin, at the ash and the blackened beams and the empty space where a home had stood. Then she looked at her family, and she began to plan. The rebuilding started 3 days later. Word had spread through Copper Creek about what had happened on Granite Ridge, about how a widow and a hermit had stood against Malcolm Drake and won, about how a 12-year-old boy had ridden 2 days through dangerous territory to bring help, about how the man who had terrorized the territory for a decade was finally going to face justice. People came, first a trickle, then a flood. Martha Whitfield arrived with a wagon full of supplies and a crew of women who set up a cooking station and began feeding everyone who showed up to help. Reverend Thornton came with lumber and tools donated by his congregation. Farmers who had lost their land to Drake's schemes came with strong backs and stronger determination. Miners who had been cheated, shopkeepers who had been extorted, families who had suffered in silence for years. They came to help the family who had finally given them their freedom. By the end of the first week, the foundation of a new cabin had been laid, larger than the old one, stronger, built not by one man alone, but by a community working together. Eli supervised the construction from a chair on the ridge, his wound still too fresh for heavy labor. Eleanor suspected he was going quietly mad with the enforced rest, but the doctor had been very clear about the consequences of overexertion. "I feel useless," he grumbled one afternoon watching Samuel and a group of volunteers raise a wall frame. "You feel alive," Eleanor corrected. "That is not the same thing. I should be out there helping. You should be healing so you can help for the next 50 years. She sat down beside him and took his hand. "The cabin can wait. The fences can wait. Nothing is more important than you getting better." Eli looked at her, at this woman who had stood beside him through fire and blood, who had saved his life and the lives of their children, who had faced down a monster and won. "I love you," he said. The words came out rough, unpracticed. He had not said them to anyone in 8 years, had not allowed himself to feel them. But now, sitting on this ridge, surrounded by the sounds of hammers and saws and children's laughter, the words felt as natural as breathing. Eleanor squeezed his hand. "I love you too." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their new home take shape. "Mama." Catherine appeared at Eleanor's elbow, her golden curls tangled and her face smudged with dirt. "Mrs. Whitfield says lunch is ready. And I am supposed to tell you that Reverend Thornton wants to talk to you about something important. Did he say what? No, but he looked very serious." Catherine's brow furrowed. "Do you think someone is in trouble? I think someone has a question." Eleanor smiled and ruffled her daughter's hair. "Go wash up for lunch. I will be there in a minute." Catherine ran off toward the cooking station, shouting for her siblings as she went. "Important question," Eli raised an eyebrow. "I have a suspicion. Want to share?" Eleanor smiled mysteriously. "You will find out soon enough." She stood and walked toward where Reverend Thornton was waiting, a small book clutched in his hands and a nervous expression on his weathered face. Eli watched her go, wondering what she was planning. The wedding took place 2 weeks later. It was a simple ceremony held on the ridge overlooking the valley as the sun set behind the mountains. Reverend Thornton officiated. Martha Whitfield served as witness. The entire population of Copper Creek, or so it seemed, had gathered to celebrate. Eleanor wore a dress that Martha had made for her, nothing fancy. Simple blue cotton with white lace at the collar. But Eli looked at her like she was wearing silk and diamonds. The children stood in a row beside them. Josephine holding the twins, Samuel standing straight and proud, Margaret clutching a bouquet of dried wildflowers she had gathered from somewhere. Will and Catherine, fidgeting, but trying to be still. 7 witnesses to a new beginning. Do you? Elijah Mercer Thornton began, "Take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part." Eli looked at Eleanor, at her brown eyes shining with tears, at her smile, radiant and real. "I do. And do you, Eleanor Hartwell, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part?" Eleanor felt the weight of the moment settle over her. This was not just a legal formality. This was a promise, a commitment, a declaration to the world and to herself that she was choosing this man, this life, this family. I do. Then by the power vested in me by God and the territory of Montana, I now pronounce you husband and wife." Thornton smiled. "You may kiss the bride." Eli pulled her close and kissed her, gentle at first, then deeper, more certain. The crowd cheered. The children made exaggerated gagging sounds. Someone started clapping, and soon the entire ridge was thundering with applause. When they finally broke apart, Eleanor was laughing and crying at the same time. Mrs. Mercer, Eli, said, his voice rough with emotion. "Officially this time. Mr. Mercer," she touched his face, tracing the scar on his cheek. "How does it feel like waking up from a very long nightmare?" He pulled her close again. "Like coming home." The celebration lasted well into the night. There was food and music and dancing. There was laughter and stories and tears of joy. There were toasts to the bride and groom, to the children, to the brave people of Copper Creek who had finally found their courage. Eleanor danced with each of her children in turn, with Samuel, who held her stiffly and blushed when she kissed his cheek, with Josephine, who cried and said she had never been so happy, with Margaret, who insisted on leading and stepped on Eleanor's toes at least a dozen times, with Will, who was too shy to really dance but swayed back and forth with his arms around her waist, with Catherine, who twirled and spun like a music box ballerina, with Lily and Rose, who each held one of her hands and jumped up and down until they collapsed in giggles. Then she danced with Eli. They moved slowly, barely swaying her head on his shoulder, his arms wrapped around her like he would never let go. The music faded. The crowd disappeared. There was only the two of them alone in a bubble of perfect happiness. "I have something to tell you," Eleanor said quietly. "What?" She pulled back to look at him, took his hands, placed them on her stomach. "We are going to have another child." Eli went very still. "Another. I spoke with the doctor." She smiled tremulously. "He confirmed it this morning. The baby should come in late autumn. November, he thinks." Eli stared at her. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. "A baby," he whispered. "Our baby." Something broke open in Eli's face, something that had been locked away for 8 years. Tears spilled down his weathered cheeks, cutting tracks through the dust and the grief and the long years of loneliness. "I never thought," he began, his voice cracking, "I never thought I would have this again. A family, a child, a reason to wake up in the morning." "You have 7 reasons," Eleanor said gently. "Soon to be 8. 8!" Eli laughed through his tears. 8 children. I'm going to need a bigger cabin. Good thing we are building one." He pulled her close and held her, his face buried in her hair, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Not of grief this time, of joy, of overwhelming, impossible joy. "I love you," he said against her ear. "I love you so much it scares me. Do not be scared." Eleanor held him tighter. "We have been through fire and blood and monsters in human skin. A baby is nothing compared to that." Eli laughed again, pulling back to look at her with eyes that shone like stars. "A baby," he repeated wonderingly. "Our baby, our baby." Spring came early that year. By April, the new cabin stood complete on the ridge, larger than the old one as promised. 4 bedrooms, a proper kitchen, a wide porch that wrapped around 3 sides with a rocking chair that Eli had built just for Eleanor. The children had claimed their spaces with the enthusiasm of young settlers staking new territory. Samuel and Will shared one room, their beds arranged on opposite walls, with a careful line of demarcation down the middle. Josephine had her own small room finally, with a window that looked out over the valley, and a writing desk where she composed letters to a pen pal she had acquired in Fort Collins. Margaret and Catherine shared a room that seemed to accumulate animals at an alarming rate despite Eleanor's protests. The twins had their own space, too, decorated with drawings that covered every available surface. And in the corner of the main room, beside the stone fireplace that Eli had built with his own hands, stood a cradle, empty for now, but waiting. The trial of Malcolm Drake concluded in May. Marshal Caldwell himself brought the news, riding up the ridge on a sunny afternoon with a document in his hand and something that might have been a smile on his weathered face. Guilty on all counts, he announced. Life imprisonment in a federal penitentiary. No possibility of parole. Eleanor felt something unknot in her chest, a tension she had been carrying for months, finally releasing. "It is over. It is over." Caldwell handed her the document. "A copy of the verdict for your records. I thought you would want to see it in writing." Eleanor took the paper with trembling hands. She read it 3 times before she believed it. What about his men, the ones who escaped the battle? Most have scattered. A few have been arrested on lesser charges. The organization is broken. Caldwell looked out over the valley at the green grass pushing through the last of the snow. Copper Creek is free. Because of you. Because of everyone who stood up, that too. He tipped his hat. "Take care of yourself, Mrs. Mercer, and that family of yours." He rode away, leaving Eleanor standing on the porch with proof of justice in her hands. That evening, she read the verdict aloud to the whole family gathered around the dinner table. When she finished, nobody spoke for a long moment. Then Catherine broke the silence. "Does this mean the bad man can never come back?" "Never," Eleanor confirmed. "He is going to be locked away forever." "Good." Catherine nodded with satisfaction. Thunder did not like him anyway. "Thunder does not like anyone," Samuel pointed out. "Thunder likes me," Margaret protested. "Thunder tolerates you. There is a difference." The argument that followed was loud and familiar and wonderful. Eleanor let it wash over her like music smiling at Eli across the table. He smiled back. They were going to be all right. The baby came on a cold November morning. Eleanor labored through the night surrounded by Martha Whitfield and 2 other women from Copper Creek who had experience with such things. Eli paced the porch outside, refusing to go further despite the freezing temperature. The children waited in the barn, supposedly asleep in the hayloft, actually huddled together, whispering anxious questions that none of them could answer. "Is Mama going to be okay?" Catherine asked for the 100th time. "Mama is strong," Josephine said. "She has done this 7 times before, but she screamed. I heard her scream." "That is normal," Margaret said, with the confidence of someone who had absolutely no idea what she was talking about. "The baby is very big. It takes a lot of screaming to get it out." "That does not make sense. Babies do not make sense." At dawn, the crying stopped. For one terrible moment, silence hung over the homestead like a shroud. Then a new sound pierced the air, thin and high and impossibly beautifully alive. A baby's cry. Eli burst through the cabin door before anyone could stop him. He found Eleanor in their bed, exhausted and pale, but radiant with joy. And in her arms, wrapped in a soft blanket, was a tiny red-faced infant with a thatch of dark hair and lungs that could wake the dead. "It is a boy," Martha announced, "healthy and strong." "Congratulations, Mr. Mercer." Eli approached the bed like a man walking through a dream. He knelt beside Eleanor, one hand reaching out to touch the baby's cheek. "He is beautiful," he whispered. "He looks like you." Eleanor smiled tiredly. Same nose, same stubborn chin. "God help us all." The children crowded in behind him, jostling for position, trying to see. "He is so small," Will breathed. "He is so loud," Margaret corrected. "Can I hold him?" Catherine asked. "Later, sweetheart." Eleanor looked at Eli. "What should we call him?" Eli studied the tiny face, seeing echoes of Sarah in the curve of the brow, echoes of Emily in the shape of the mouth. But also something new, something unique, something that belonged only to this child and this family and this moment. "Thomas," he said. "After your first husband, the man who gave you these amazing children." He paused. "Thomas Elijah Mercer." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "Thomas Elijah Mercer," she repeated. "That is perfect." The baby stopped crying as if he approved of his name. He yawned, showing tiny pink gums, and closed his eyes. "Welcome to the family," Thomas Eli whispered. "You are going to love it here." 1 year later, on the anniversary of the auction, the Mercer family gathered on the ridge. 9 of them now standing in a row before the cabin that Hope had built. Eleanor held Thomas on her hip, watching him grab at the air with chubby fists. Eli stood beside her, one arm around her waist, the other resting on Samuel's shoulder. The older children had grown so much in the past year. Samuel was nearly as tall as Eli, now broad-shouldered and confident. Josephine had blossomed into a young woman, beautiful and bright, with plans to start a school in Copper Creek come fall. Margaret was still wild, still fierce, still accompanied everywhere by a cranky cat named Thunder. Will had lost the last of his sickly pallor and spent his days exploring the mountains, cataloging plants and animals in notebooks that filled an entire shelf. Catherine had discovered a talent for music and was teaching herself to play the old fiddle that someone had donated to the family. The twins had started speaking in complete sentences, usually at the same time, usually about different things. 7 children from Eleanor's first marriage, 1 child from her second, 9 lives intertwined, growing together like roots of the same tree. "What are you thinking about?" Eli asked quietly. Eleanor smiled. "I am thinking about that day in Copper Creek, standing on that auction block, believing my life was over." She looked up at him. "I was wrong. You were brave. I was terrified. Same thing." Eli kissed her forehead. "Brave does not mean not scared. Brave means scared, but standing anyway." "Then I suppose we are all brave." "I suppose we are." Thomas gurgled and reached for his father's beard. Eli leaned in, letting the baby grab a fistful. "Strong grip," he observed. "Going to be a rancher for sure." "Or a banker," Eleanor said. "Those hands could count money. Do not even joke about that." She laughed, leaning into him, feeling his warmth and his strength and his love surrounding her like a shelter. 1 year ago, she had been sold on an auction block for $300. A widow, a mother of 7. Worthless, they had called her. Undesirable. A burden no sane man would carry. Now she stood on her own land in front of her own home, surrounded by her own family. A husband who loved her. Children who thrived. A future that stretched out before them like an endless summer road. "Mama," Catherine tugged at her sleeve. "Can we have cake now? You promised cake." "I did promise cake, did I not? You promised a lot of cake." "Well then, we had better go have a lot of cake." The family trooped inside, filling the cabin with noise and laughter and life. Eleanor paused at the door, looking back at the ridge, at the mountains standing guard like ancient sentinels, at the 2 weathered crosses on the hillside above where Sarah and Emily rested in eternal peace. She had never met them, never would meet them, but she felt their presence sometimes in quiet moments, a warmth in the air, a whisper on the wind, a sense that somewhere, somehow, they were watching over this family that had grown from the seeds of grief. "Thank you," she whispered, "for sharing him with me." The wind stirred gentle and soft, like a hand brushing her cheek. Then Eleanor Mercer turned and walked into her home, closing the door on the past and stepping forward into the bright and beautiful future. The cabin was warm, the cake was sweet, the children were loud, and Eleanor Hartwell Mercer, who had once been sold for $300 on a cold January morning, knew that she was the richest woman in the entire territory. Not in gold, not in land, not in anything that could be counted or measured or weighed, but in love, in family, in the impossible, unshakable, eternal knowledge that she had found her place in the world, and that was worth everything.